Hi, welcome back to the Nobodies Project, or welcome for the first time. This is a podcast where we talk to creatives about creativity. If you want to be a part of this community, we very much encourage you to submit your artwork to us so any of these artists from season 1 or season 2 can give you advice, feedback, all that good stuff. This episode, the second to last episode of season 2, has one of my favorite guests of the season, Phil Good. He's an artist who I've been listening to for a couple years, absolutely adores music, and I feel very, very lucky that I got to talk to them, and it just felt so natural, super, super fun. I can't wait for you to listen to it, and please go check out their music as well. So this is season 2 of the Nobodies Project. Today we have Jared, known as Phil Good. He's a musician and originally from Portland.
Originally from, west, Beaverton area.
Nice.
Lived in Portland, LA. Now I live in Corvallis.
Nice.
Yep.
Wow, huge reaction from the producer for a location.
Yay. Hell yeah.
But the first question I ask every artist who comes on the show is, what do you do for money? And then what do you do for art? And does it differ?
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess I'll just go back. So I came out of the womb in 1991. No, I've been doing music for money-ish since right out of high school. Okay. It was not much money at all. And then I would have a job and then go on tour. And then I was in a bunch of different bands and stuff. And then in 2016, I moved to LA from Portland. And I started doing writing and producing for others and started this project, Feel Good. In 2018, I signed a publishing deal, and that was the first time. Up until then, so 2013 to 16, I was kind of living off TuneCore, royalty. It was oh, some months it was 500, some months it was 2,000. I was like, yay. Let me preface, I'm not very responsible with money. I feel like a lot of creatives aren't.
No.
But so in 2018, I signed a publishing deal, which was the first time I was I can make a living, I can live now. And then I realized, I was you get a large chunk of money that will last for 2 to 7 years, depending on how much you make them back. And then signed a record deal in 2019, kind of the same situation. I was okay, cool, I'm safe again for a little bit. And then now I'm kind of back to the monthly royalty checks that are iffy. I'm also helping with some sound at a church that my mom's friend runs. I'm not religious myself, but they're really nice, and they're like, hey, will you come turn the volume knobs for the live stream? And I'm like, of course. Yeah. And I help set up their whole system. So right now it's kind of random. I'm now independent, so I have the opportunity to kind of collect on my own stuff more so than I did with a label, which is whole learning experience. But so this year I'm just kind of trying to build that back up and get the gears turning again for it to be money making and creative at the same time again. Yeah.
Yeah. How was that experience going from doing it all by yourself, independent, and then getting the record and the publishing and stuff? Especially when you have some of the success of some of your songs have done very, very well, and then going back to independent. Was that a conscious really positive thing, or was it more this is just kind of how it is right now?
Dude, it was the most insane polarizing feelings I've ever felt, because I was really excited with the label I was on. It was a major label called Elektra Records. And for a long time, pre-pandemic, I guess, 2019 into 2020, things were going really well.
Yeah, you were putting out music, you were putting out music videos, and then all of a sudden, I was looking at some of the timelines,
totally.
And I was oh shit, COVID just...
It really fucked me hard. Yeah. And as it did for a lot of people, I think sorry, you asked me...
Basically, I mean, you can just talk on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, because I had something to say and then I forgot.
Going from a record label to independent.
To independent. Okay, so I basically the end of 2021, I I was kind of slow for 2020 and into 21, and I kind of started picking up again. Like internally, I was like, okay, I can make this work. I'd already moved back to Oregon, so I was far from the friends and community that I had started the project around, but I had kind of utilized the label to help me pay to go back for 3-week trips and book sessions and kind of get things moving again.
So you're still connected.
Yeah,
back
totally.
and forth.
Yeah. And I basically at the end of 21, I was like, all right, we're back. The A&R that I had at the time was like, we're so excited. And I was like, great, so am I. And there was even a point where they were like, oh, if you want to move back to LA, like we'll help you. We'll pay for you to live here for like a year as you get things rolling again. So I was stoked, and I was like making plans to move back. And then started 2022, I just didn't hear from them for like a month. And I was like planning things, and then they were like, oh, actually, we'll drop you and part ways. And and then the same thing happened with my management, who I'd been with for 10 years. And so it was equally, like when I say polarizing, it was like the most exciting thing, because I was like, oh my God, I'm finally like, I can do whatever I want. But at the same time, the very like sensitive side of me was
the
like,
creative side of you just got dropped.
Yeah, I'm worthless. Like nobody, like nothing, like nobody wants me anymore. So it was really interesting. Like,
We're good. Just keep going.
I had it was very like, one day I would wake up and be like, yes, I can do anything.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this song. I'm gonna play a show here. I'm gonna do this, and then the next day be like, who am I? Like, what's the point? I think I, as a person, have always been very like energized by the people around me, and living in Corvallis is nice, but it's nice because I live kind of in the forest in the middle of nowhere, and it's beautiful and fresh, and I'm around my family, but at the same time I thrive off of like going to a friend's house and being like, oh, let's start a song at 10 p.m. and then it's 3 and we're like, oh, this is the best thing we've ever made.
Just the opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
That you don't really get, even just hometown, even if it's Corvallis or wherever it is.
Totally.
I just feel like if you make that community somewhere, once you start utilizing it, once you take it away, at least for me, I remember when I moved across the country, I didn't realize the community I had until I left it.
Yeah.
And that's just massive.
Totally. And I left LA November of 2020. So it was after the whole year of just like sitting inside my apartment with no AC, like just like spending $1,600 a month for a 400 square foot box. And I was like, I gotta leave. And then it wasn't till I was gone for a while that I was like, oh man, I miss, like now all my friends can hang out again. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just here with my cat and my family. But yeah, the experience was interesting. I'm still kind of like trying to not bounce back from it, but trying to like find my solid ground from really feeling like I was on a stride with the team that I had, and also not taking the departure like personally and creatively, you know. So it's just been an interesting like couple, I guess a year now. But right now I'm doing this. I'm taking a lot of trips to LA this year, where I'm like, sorry, I'm kind of shivering. It's kind of cold. I'm just like a little bony boy. Yeah. I'm going to take trips this year, every 6 weeks for about 3 weeks, and kind of rebuilding that, like, oh yeah, I'm a part of this.
Nice. And
I have my community there that I can lean on and work with.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Talking about collaborations, I found this person through doing your music videos. The director, Brent Campanelli.
Yeah.
And I've noticed the last 2 music videos were done by him as well. Yeah. And I love those. They're fantastic. Were those part of the independent? Is that part of the new phase of stuff?
No. So Brent, with my older stuff, one of my best friends, Spencer Graves, he's an incredible production designer. Production design is what he does mostly, but he's one of those people that can just do everything. Like one day I was like, oh man, I wish I had a bag. And he'd be like, oh, I'll sew you one. And he just made me a bag in an hour. And one day I was like, oh man, I wish I could go get a haircut with their clothes. He's like, I'll give you a haircut. And he gave me the best haircut I've ever had. And he directed the first few when I was on Elektra. So Do You Ever, Put It All on Me, and Wonder.
Yep.
And then I met Brent, and we just instantly connected because we hired him to edit a music video called for my song called Falling, and he was a friend of a friend, and then we hung out and we just clicked, and then he was like, oh, I kind of want to do more creative direction and overall like creative video, but also figuring out the whole thing, and so then we just teamed up and we made How Do I Feel right before I moved from LA, and then what is the other one we did? We did like this documentary. Where right after I moved to Oregon, he came up and we just like filmed for 3 days, and then did Float On. And yeah, he's amazing, and we still talk a lot. He's just gotten very busy with like. I feel like a lot of music video people, especially in LA, like either they become the best and the most wanted in music videos, or they're like, I'm gonna do a lot of different stuff because I'm good enough too. So they're like, why would I just stick with like these low budget?
Cool
So we've talked about doing more as I'm coming down more this year, but he's awesome.
I've always been a huge fan of just music videos in general. How is like that process? Like when you write a song, produce it out, do you have like a vision in mind that you're like, this song needs a music video?
Yeah. Sometimes I do, and certain friends that I work with, one of my like favorite co-writers that I've written a lot of my songs with is this artist named Buzz. There's been multiple times where we've written a song, and she actually is like, while we're writing it, she's like, oh my God, I can see the music video being you laying here on this hospital bed and your head split open, and I'm like, yeah, I love that. So it sometimes works that way. I think I didn't really think in music video until I was on a label because I just never really had the budget to dream about it. But when I was in high school, I wanted to do film stuff. Like I wanted to go to PSU for film, and then I shattered my mom's heart when I was like, actually, I'm going to go on tour with my friend for $10 a show. So I don't think like that all the time, and now it's really interesting because even when I was on Elektra, we did a handful of music videos, but near the end of our time together, they were basically like, oh, hey, we're not going to do music videos anymore. We're going to have smaller budgets that's for TikToks. And I was like, sick. I love that. That's so cool. I'm so excited for that. Which I'm trying to adapt, and I think it's important to adapt, but at the same time, there's something fun about, for me, making music videos with people I was friends with, like Spencer and Brent, where I could be like, have this idea that was maybe awful, or maybe there was something in it that was great, and they would just be like, okay, what if we took that part and expanded that into the whole, you know what I mean? And we would hang out for like nights and nights and think of this idea and make a treatment together. So it's fun to be a part of it in that sense, especially because me by myself, like that's not how my mind works, is like frame by frame. But it's fun to like be involved in that aspect of it. But yeah, nowadays it's like, even my friend was telling me that they're cutting huge artists' music video budgets by like 80%. Like huge artists are having like, hey, we're just gonna spend $100K instead of $800 on this video.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because like, where's the money coming from? It's not, it's not MTV anymore, but still like music videos for me, like always enhance a song so much more than just like listening to it straight. It like adds another layer to it.
Totally. And it tells the story that fans of an artist want to see.
Yeah. 100%.
And now it's just interesting that it's TikTok, which is just so predictable, like you can have the coolest 6 different 30-second like music video ideas, and even actually the Float On video and How Do I Feel, we kind of cheated. The label was like, hey, this isn't a real music video, like make it for TikTok. And we were like, okay, and then we just kind of didn't. And we said, oh, look, we can chop it up and have it look like it's for TikTok. But
I could see that with the Float On one for sure.
Yeah,
like there's certain parts where you could just take it out.
Totally. But yeah, it's just really odd. And now I think too, like people on an app like TikTok like can see through if you're trying too hard. So it's like almost like the better thing to do is not have a budget and just make something goofy that works for you.
Yeah. How is just dealing with, I mean, especially with having to put out your music and everything? I'm sure with the management team, they did they helped you a fair amount. But how is social media now, especially being independent, where it's like, I've noticed how you use Instagram. It's how I wish I would, where it's like, I'm only going to get on there every so often, and I'll just like, hey, got a new song, please go listen, and then I'm fucking out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I want to be better about that. I think I get really caught up. Like, I notice how good it makes me feel when I get reaction on social media, which is like normal, but I also know that like it fulfills like a different, like it feels like it's fulfilling me in an unhealthy way. You know, it's like Soylent. I'm like, oh, I don't think I should only be drinking Soylent. I should probably eat some veggies. But like, I feel full, but then I have weird shits. You know what I mean? Like that's how I feel about Instagram and TikTok, and I want to be better at it, and I'm trying to be. I do actually have a new manager now, who's an old friend of mine from like 2011 that I toured with randomly, and he's been helpful in giving me ideas and sharing things with me, and also understanding that like I'm not just gonna like full flip and be like, "What's up, guys? I'm on TikTok all the time now," because I do feel like I could be good at it, but it's like, how do I want to, you know, divvy up my energy and my time to like balance being good at it, being consistent, but also like not like fiending for it, and not, you know, I feel like I'm just old enough to where like I remember my first tour with a GPS and I had a flip phone, you know what I mean? And now it's like some people are so comfortable just being like, I just wrote this song, like check it out. Oh, and then dancing their own song, and I'm just like, I would look like such an idiot if I did that. But.
Yeah, like I remember watching something, I think it was Ty Verdes, who was like, it's really simple. You just like sit in your car and then you just sing along to your song, and it'll blow up if it's the right thing. I was like, how do you just record yourself in the car, like singing about that? Kind of going off that, how is like performing in, whether it's just performing on stage or in music videos, are you somebody who gets very camera shy or anything like that? Or is it just something that you're like, well, this is the life I chose, so I kind of have to get into it and it's what you want to do? Maybe like a theater kid growing up, something like that?
Excuse me. I wasn't a theater kid. I was a metal band kid.
Nice.
I was like in sophomore year, and I was just like, I just want to make breakdowns and sing about how much how mad I am at my parents, and like have my friend just, so I think it's interesting performing like on a stage. Even if I haven't performed in a long time, I think I always feel like a sense of comfort, because I've been, if you count like the high school battle of bands and local shows, like it's been, 15 years of just like doing that. And I've toured a lot with different bands, and so I'm pretty comfortable with that. Like I had a show last July with some friends at the Hawthorne.
I was there.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, the God show, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And I was super nervous because I hadn't played in a long time, and I was first time having somebody else play with me and trying to use a bunch of drum machines and synths, and it was 2 weeks of hell. Like my house was like no AC. I was just like literally in my underwear, like trying to figure out how to like get Ableton to trigger the drum machine, and I was like, God damn it, going crazy. And at the time I was like smoking weed when I probably shouldn't have been, so I would just get really high and try to figure something out that I couldn't figure out, and then I would be up till 4 a.m, and then I was like, okay, I'll just figure it out tomorrow. And so I was really nervous for that show, but when I got on stage to play, there was like, most of it was alleviated, which is like a nice feeling as you get older and have that practice. And I also think that's something that isn't necessarily better or worse, but something that people in the music industry and friends of mine have noticed is that in the last couple of years, a lot of the artists that are younger that blow up on TikTok, like really blow up and then get like a $3 million deal, like that is maybe where they struggle the most, because they're 18 and have never played a show in their life, and they think, their experience of it is like sitting in their room like singing songs, and they're incredible, but like, but now you have to go out for 3 months at a time.
Actual eyes looking
sleep
at
at
you, not just
hotels,
numbers looking at you.
be tired. Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like that's like something I'm grateful for, is that I had the years of like literally sleeping on top of the van at a rest stop in a sleeping bag and just like, you know. But it's weird how it doesn't. On the other hand, it doesn't translate for me as easily on my phone. Like, I'm not as comfortable like singing with my guitar in front of my phone, because if I mess up one little thing, I'm like, well, they could just watch it again and notice every time that I mess up the same thing, you know. But when I'm live, I don't care. I'm just like, this is an experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm always curious because I've talked to Bradley a couple times. He's a musician as well. About like, he's like, oh man, I messed up this little thing live. Are you like a perfectionist like that?
Okay, yeah. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I try not to be, and a lot of my friends, I have to get like one big shiver out, so you can all just let me like. It's like ice cold. It's ice cold in here. They're trying to kill me. They're getting me.
Look around.
They're getting me drunk, and then they're gonna freeze me to death. Okay. Is it hot in here? Is it just me? Repeat the question.
My question comes down to it's actually a question I have written down here. That's since you put out a lot of singles that have a lot of success through them. Do you have a sense of like perfectionism when you're releasing stuff, or just in general?
Yeah, I have a massive like. I think I pretend to myself that I don't, but I definitely do, and I don't notice when I'm by myself. I notice when I'm working with friends. One of my closest friends, who I'm working with a lot now, is named Grant Averill. He's an incredible songwriter, an incredible producer and guitarist, and all around just great, funny dude. And he, I had 3 days with him when I was in LA a couple weeks ago. And we both produced in Ableton, and he basically was like, this wasn't all he was doing. We wrote songs together, but like often I would be like, oh, what about this? And I would have an idea, and he would be like, yes, that's it. He would like build off of it, and then wouldn't let me stop. Like he would just be like, that's sick. What's next? And then I'd be like, but wait, but I said and you know, I wonder if and how does and sing versus like maybe of? And he's like, no, like we did it. Like keep moving.
Yeah.
So it's when I'm with people, I get checked in that sense, and I really appreciate that. So I'm trying to almost like when I work by myself now, be like, what would Grant do? What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I definitely am, and it's almost like I also feel like some artists that like I really love will take 3 years to put out an album, and then you listen and you're like, oh my God, like everything is just right. And they'll talk about the same struggles of like perfecting everything. So I think for a while I was like, oh, I'm going to be that. I'm just going to like take my time and really go in. Like the song Do You Ever had maybe like 20 different versions. Jeez. And it was as we were finishing the final version that I still hated. I like I played the Prophet synth, and basically we were like, all right, let's scrap all of that and let's replace it with this. And it was finally it. And it was grueling. And my friend Chris, that I did a bunch of songs with and work with a lot, we both enjoy the tinkering and the perfecting. But we also recognize it like, damn, that shouldn't have taken like 4 months of like one session a week to like tinker.
Yeah. Both me and Molly do design work as like our main trade, but there's like this theory around it where it's like it has to be done eventually, because like I'm sure it's the same thing with music. Like you could tinker with that forever. Mm-hmm. So how do you know when you're like done? Is it just when you're like, all right, I'm just going to put it out so it's done, and or is it like, okay, somebody has to tell you?
In the past, it's been somebody has to tell me, but I think a lot of the people that told me, I just didn't trust. Yeah. Like at the time, my managers would be like, "What are you doing? Like this is done." I'd be like,
"You have no idea.
You think that kick drum is the final kick? Are you deaf? Like, do you hear how clicky it is?" And like, I think now I'm just trying to trust. Like, one of the songs I did with Grant is called "Unalive." We wrote it in like 2 hours, did most of the production, right then in a room that like didn't sound very good with speakers that didn't sound very good. So in the back of my mind, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this and like just like massage it for weeks. But then he was also like, okay, this is like pretty much done. You know that, right? And I was like, yeah,
like,
of course I know that. Yeah. And so we did one more day. We added like some extra guitars. And then I'm just, with that, like in trying to change how I approach it, I'm being like, this is done. Like, yes, your voice was a little raspy that day, but like it sounds fine. It sounds cool. Like, don't worry about it. So I'm trying to be more objective about it and be like, nobody's gonna listen and think like, oof, that one part of the guitar like kind of drifts. Yeah. Like, no, because the whole thing is the vibe and it works.
Right.
I'm just trying to, I really want to get better at that because that's been my biggest setback is like me working in a 4-bar loop and building off that instead of being like, no, let's build this way. Let's build like verse pre-chorus instead of like, ooh, this is a sick idea for a chorus. Let me add every single possible instrument that could be in that part and then be like, well, how do I get into this? How do I get out of it? Growing up, I was unfortunately not allowed to listen to like non-Christian bands for a while. And so I found there's metal Christian that I really like. And then my dad
was a lot of Reliant K.
It was a lot of Reliant K. And then my dad was also like, oh, but you can also listen to things I like Prince and John Mayer. And I was like, okay. So anyway, so I was always like, oh, like I love like Daughters. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. But anyway, when I went to LA, I learned a lot for writing, through writing for other people about like the more formulaic like pop writing and the kind that people like we were just talking about, like listening to Dua Lipa, you're like, oh, that's Dua Lipa, but then you're like, oh, but it gets stuck in my head, and learning kind of the reasons why it gets stuck in your head and why like a word choice or like the internal rhymes of a chorus are super important. And I think that's something that I still gravitate towards. Like I find myself lately trying to almost break those rules more because naturally I'm just like, oh no, I want, like for instance, my song Everything's Good. The lyric is, I didn't get smarter like mama said. I didn't go to college like all my friends, and I still don't have $1. Like I intentionally was like, we made it so that smarter and dollar rhymed, like all these little things. Yeah. And we would spend like an hour plus on each of these lines to be like, okay, but maybe dollar, like
right.
The work that goes into like a pop, like melody and line and word choice, and also how the concept overall works together, to me was really appealing, because that's what like catches you. You're like, you hear his pop song and you're like, oh, that's really stupid. But then you're singing Beauty and the Beat by Justin Bieber and Nicki Minaj. 10 years later, I find myself being like, oh, all I need is a beauty. I'm like, why? Like, oh, because it's stuck in my head for years. But anyway, I think now I also love a lot of stuff that is the opposite of that. Or like we were talking earlier in the other room about An Immortal Orchestra. Like I love his music, and I love Bon Iver, and I love so many styles of music, but I always just tend to be like, oh, what do I like about that, and how can I make it like, naturally I just tend to be like, oh, I want things to be a little more pop tight. You know what I mean?
No, it definitely comes across in all with the poppy stuff and some of the electronic stuff in there as well. But the one question kind of in that vein is like, you listen to a whole bunch of different stuff. You might gravitate towards pop, but what would be like your like Lil Wayne rock album where it's like completely different genre? You want to try something completely different. Obviously, it would have pop vibes because you have that like in your soul a bit.
Yeah.
But what would be your off the wall, way different album?
Dude, I don't know. I feel like it's not that different, because I feel like if I say any of these things, I could find a song of mine that'd be like, oh yeah, that drum is exactly that thing you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But something I've wanted to do for a long time. Do you remember when Leon Bridges came out with his first album with like, baby, 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 I'm coming home to, like that whole album, it sounded like it was from 1950s.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do an album. And it kind of sucks because like The Weeknd is doing like the 80s and like Blinded by the Lights and all that. But I've always wanted to do an album where I'm singing like, oh, he loved me, like singing like a croony, like Rick Astley type of guy, because the song Falling that I have, it's all glitchy and electronic and weird. The original version of that song I wrote in a basement when I was living in Portland with my friend, and we wrote it completely as a joke in like 80s. I was like, we don't live like we used to. Like I was singing it like in 80s. I noticed
your voice sounds so much different in that compared to most of your other stuff.
Yeah. That one, the real version is like auto-tuned and weird and glitchy. But I've always wanted to do like just a full send, sing in like a rounded Michael McDonald voice pop record, like 80s inspired. Or that, or like somehow make a metal record, but I can't scream or sound. I sound very like, like
this is your style.
Yeah. Or I've also gravitated towards like really good house music, like
oh wow,
just like not heavy, like soft, warm, synthy house music. But again, all of those things, I think I can point at little things in my own music that I'm like, oh, I kind of do a little bit of that there and a little bit of that there.
I was gonna say, does that fulfill like taking those elements? Does that fulfill that like want to do that stuff, or is there something like, oh well, now I feel pressure because like people are expecting certain things out of me, like I have a certain style, so if you switched up, people would be like, nah, this isn't it.
I definitely feel that pressure. I think like the thing that I think differentiates those things I told you in my music is that the stuff I've done with Feel Good, it's all very lyric focused. And like I said, I spend a lot of time thinking about the concept and the lyrics and like making it a full and it often pertains exactly to what I'm experiencing. Like Living With No One is a song of mine where I literally had a relationship that I thought would never ended, and I was like living alone for the first time in a long time, and we just talked about it for hours and then wrote that song. And I feel like in wanting to make something like my Lil Wayne rock album, like you said, I'd want it to be like, no, I don't want it to sound like that. I don't want it to be like, okay, I want the writing process to be not focusing on like where are you at right now? I want it to be like, no, I want to write a song about she's the moon. What does that mean? I don't fucking know, but like I want it to be like, you're the moon, like that's what I would want that to be completely different.
I love that.
I
had actually had a question on here about like most of your songs are about like breaking a threshold or like where you are at. And especially with like your newest song at the time of the recording, Thank You. It's one of my favorite songs of yours, but it's amplified by the fact that like I saw you post on Instagram explaining why or like where that song comes from, what it means. So with a lot of your stuff, it's very personal. It's about a lot of mental health almost. Do you feel a need to almost explain it, or do you want to explain it? Because one of my favorite artists, the Front Bottoms, I don't know if you ever heard of them. Brian Sella, the lyricist for them, talks about how he intentionally doesn't tell people about it because he wants them to come up with their own meaning about it. But with Thank You, it very clearly was like, you wrote that whole thing, and I was like, oh, now this song has such a bigger meaning to me because it's like, oh, that's what I should be listening for. Right. Where do you have that balance of like, no, guys, this is what it's about?
Yeah. I don't know, because I also like when I'm not told.
Yeah.
But I think, have this feeling of like, oh, I need to explain.
Yeah.
So it's a weird like place to be. I think that one specifically, like I wrote it with my friend Peter Thomas and another friend, Victoria Zaro, both like amazingly talented people. Victoria wrote that huge Tate McRae song, I Broke You First or something. I think that's what it's called. Really, really good writer. And originally she was going to sing the second verse as like, so we wanted it to be painted as like, oh, people are going to think this is about a relationship, and we're not going to say it, but it really is about you and your brain. And I don't know if I said it in that post, but I was talking about how like I heard this podcast where the guy was like, I just every night thinking about like, did I make the wrong choice about moving my family out of LA, blah, blah, blah. And the other guy was like, maybe if you said, hey, thanks for worrying, like we're good, I've got this, instead of letting your brain be like taking over. So that was what the whole song was about. So originally it was going to be like, oh, let's make it sound like it's about a relationship, but we'll know and maybe never tell. But then once she couldn't do it because she had a bunch of other songs coming out around the same time, so I just re-sang the verse and put it out. And I think I wanted to share my experience just so that people I don't know. I feel like I have to explain myself a lot. I want to put out more music, but I hit all these kind of mental roadblocks and creative blocks, and I want to be like, I'm really proud of this. Here's why it took me so long, and here's what it's about. So that in an effort to maybe connect a little bit more. And I think that's just where I'm at now and where I've kind of been. But I would love to be like in a super creative, flowy state where I take a month, write a whole album, and I just don't tell anybody anything, and I'm just like, here you go, that's what I made. Yeah. You can figure it out. Yeah.
Speaking on that, I always like to ask, what's your like worst creative rut? How do you get out of them? You currently in a rut. Like how does that whole flow work for you?
I would say I've been in a rut since like 2008, maybe. like I've had spikes of like
peeked your head over the water a little bit. And
that's literally
like,
yes. I've used that like visual metaphor before, where it's like I operate here, and I'm like, okay, I did it. I like wrote like a verse.
Yeah.
Great. Not all the time, but like I think I try to use, you know, you can go on YouTube or TikTok and find a million different ideas of like breaking that. But honestly, for me to break that rut, like I was saying before, like I'm very like, I'm very like susceptible. Like I'm introverted in a way, but I'm very extroverted in the sense that I get a lot of energy from like my friends and other musicians. And like when I was in LA this last time in March, I think, I hadn't written a song in a long time, like 5-6 months. And I went, and it was just being in the room with my friend Grant, and we wrote a song in an hour. And I was like, oh, that's all I needed was just that one thing. And I was like stoked, and I was like, I'm back, bitches, you know, like I'm all good. Yeah. But then I come home and I'm like, oh wait, I'm, you know, shit.
Yeah. It's that thing with, you trick yourself with Instagram and TikTok where you're like, no, I'm getting inspiration. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing other people and like I'm getting inspired by them so I can go do more work. And it's a trick. Yeah. That never end up working. And
well, like what you said, helps.
Well, yeah, sometimes it helps a little bit, but like not to the, when you're on it like all the time, you're like, oh yeah, this is because I'm looking at photography. This counts as productivity.
Yeah, like how to create a 3D ball in Blender. I'm like, I'm never going to do that, but like I feel inspired. Yeah. I think also something that I was really good at in maybe like 2018, 19 was I would just like, I had a studio that was separate from my house, and I would go there at like 9 p.m. and stay till like 4 a.m. And I was by myself, and I had like a bunch of fun like modular stuff, and I would just play around. I would just play around with my stuff until I would either have something cool or not, and I just didn't really care.
Yeah.
And then I would know that I would have sessions in the coming weeks that I could be like, oh, look, I made this little loop and I have a melody. And that would turn into something else because maybe my co-writer would be like, oh, my God, it sounded like you said blanket. And I was like, oh, I think I might have. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm recently trying to remember that, like, going into it with, like, I'm also ADD as fuck. And, like, I used to take medicine for it, but it made me feel really anxious, so I kind of stopped. So it's like a weird. So sometimes I go into things being like, okay, so today I'm gonna write a song, but okay, I'm gonna be, and I'm like going in with all these plans, and then I do nothing, and then I feel like shit about it. Yep. And so instead, what I've been trying to do is be like, okay, one, nothing matters. Like actually, what I make today, like if I go into it with it really doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Like, I could think it's awful, and maybe I'll listen to it in a week and be like, this is the best thing I've ever made. I can think it's the best thing I've ever made. Think tomorrow, this is so dumb. Yeah. So it really doesn't matter. And so what I've been trying to do is be more like, just enjoy whatever the fuck it is. And like the other day I made like a effects rack in Ableton, which is you can take a bunch of plugins, group them together, make your own knobs for them, and close it all up. So it's just, you're just looking at the knobs that you made. And I made it as like a glitchy creation device. Sure. So I can take audio and make the delay freeze, so it'll be like free, you know, and just do shit, and then I'll re-record what I'm doing as I'm playing with it. So I'm just getting a bunch of audio of like glitchy, freezy things, and then I'll be like, cool, let me drag that into a sampler and then chop it up, and then I just play all these little things, and all of a sudden I have this really cool loop that's like a bunch of words that I sang mixed together or whatever. Like, and that to me is so fun because it makes me feel like I'm like playing with Legos again. You know what I mean? Versus being like, what am I going to write about today? Well, what is the meaning of life? Like that never happens for me, it never happens from like thinking deeply, you know? I'm like, and I think it does. And that's where I get trapped is I think like, oh, I saw this person on TikTok say like, you have to think about the concept. But for me, I'm like, I've never been a concept thinker. I just sing a bunch of melodies. Half the time it's a joke. Like it's the dumbest thing I've ever sang. And somebody that I'm with is like, that was really sick. Let's do that. I'm like, are you sure? That was like the dumbest thing I've ever said. So I'm trying to be in the, like play multiple roles in my head of being like a bunch of friends and be like, that was cool. Are you sure? Yeah, man, keep going.
Yeah. On that though, I love how you talk about a lot of the people you're collaborating with. But how is kind of like where you're going, where you're now playing some of the multiple roles of like, this is good, this isn't. Where does that like trusting your art come into? Basically, like where's your imposter syndrome sitting, and like how do you trust yourself that this is good? Is it just eventually you got to send it out to other people and get that like, okay, people I trust will tell me this is shit or not? I don't know, because it's my imposter syndrome is like, do you remember that book, The BFG by Roald Dahl?
No.
A
Big Friendly Giant. It was just,
okay.
That's my imposter syndrome, yeah. This guy.
I'm trying my best.
Never read a Roald Dahl book in his life. I feel like, I don't know why you're even talking about that. I'm just trying to say, imposter syndrome is me, and then I sometimes break through, and I'm like, oh, there you are, hi, buddy, you know. I think often if everything lines up right and I can just start playing around, excuse me, you guys gave me beer. I think the imposter guy, he kind of drifts in the background when I, kind of like what I was saying, when I just like play around. And for me, like when I like, I think like inherently I want to feel like groove. Like I want to be like, oh man, the way that those things work together is like stupid. You know? I'm just like, oh, that feels so good. And that's when that guy just like leaves the room. And then if I'm lucky and I notice that he's gone, and not even, if I just don't think about it, then I'll like build off of that. Because the second my brain turns on again, it's like back to the sunken place, back underwater. Yeah. And so I think
I couldn't relate more, because as soon as you like are, because I'm making like a video or doing something like that, and I think to myself, oh, this is really cool, and not just for myself, and be like, people are gonna, here it comes, it's all that's gone now.
Totally.
Because that guy, like you said, comes back in, and it's like, oh, well, people like this, and that's not how I got there. Because if I just do, oh, what people like, it's not what I like, and that's kind of like when you look at your creative process. If you just make stuff for other people, like it's not gonna, it's just not gonna come to what you want to do.
Totally. And I think that's where you asked me at the beginning about like where I was when I was dropped. Yeah. That's why I was so like, oh my God, I'm free, I can do anything. But at the same time, it felt like I was free and naked and like malnourished, because I was like, but I can't do anything, I can barely walk, you know what I mean? And I think because I wouldn't even say it's a downside, because it's just something I learned about myself and my personality type, and being in Los Angeles and being able to like befriend a lot of different types of people and a lot of different genres, is that I can get really like, when it comes time for me to be like, who am I feel like I am so many things that like I can't pick, you know? And I mean, I've done a lot of thinking and therapy about like how that maybe is from having two different families that are two different religions and having to be both. And, you know, I'm like, I can just fit in a lot of places. And so creatively, I think when I'm at a low, I get really caught up in, well, what am I to other people? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because like, well, that person thinks this song was really good, but like they think this song wasn't, and then another person thinks that song was good, you know? Yeah. So I think for me, it's been a practice of trying to like come back to what I like fuck with.
Yeah.
You know, and also just, again, a positive and a negative of having a management team that was very successful and that I'd been with for a long time, and a label that was a major label that was like, oh my God, like Young the Giants on this label is so cool.
Yeah.
You know, like all those things had a positive and a negative effect in that, like, I thought that they wanted me to be something. And sometimes it was their fault for like being like, hey, we want you to like go more bigger.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how much they try to shape you.
Yeah. The first year with the label, they were like, hey, do you, like, we just like what you do. And then after a while, they were like, hey, what if you made it bigger? And I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
And so I would literally go into sessions and be like, okay, I need to make something that they would like. And so my song Destination OK, I love that song, but I literally made it being like, okay, let's make a stupid thing that my label would like. I love it, like, but it has this like this deeper thing in it that's like, you didn't make this for you, you son of a bitch, you know. And I don't know. I'm not even answering direct questions. I'm just meandering. But
that's what this podcast is all about.
Okay, good. Because
I have two questions, and then we'll get out of here. One is always, well, not always. What would be like a dream concert, whether you're like viewing it as just a spectator or playing on it? So I guess one would be like favorite concert to go to, and then favorite tour to be on.
Oh boy, I've been to a couple shows that I wanted to go to. One of them,
I would hope so.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I'm out.
Yeah.
One of them was when I saw 1975 at Coachella in 2019. Last minute, a friend of mine got offered to play like at 2 p.m. on a Friday on the electronic stage at Coachella, but he got like weekend full artist passes, and he was like, do you want to be my tour manager? And I was like, fuck yeah. And so we went, and then the rest of the weekend we just got to be in the front little sections and watch all the artists. And
hell yeah.
we were both like, as 1975 were playing, we both were just like,
Cry.
like there's some, I'm a crier. Like I'll watch The Office, and every third episode I'm like, you know. And so like 3 or 4 of the songs, what was one of them? Love It If We Made It. You know that song? Anybody out there? When they played that one, and there was all these images of like war and all this stuff, and I was just like standing there like bawling, just like, oh, I'd love it if we made it too, and I don't think we will. Another one was when I saw Bon Iver at Outside Lands. Mm-hmm. And again, with the same friend, he was playing, same exact situation. He was like, on a tour manager, and I was like, sure. And we were right up front, and he played the song Creeks, and we were just there, just literally bawling in the beautiful San Francisco park. So I would love to see them again.
Just
for a good cry.
Just play those ones back.
Yeah. And then a tour. We talked earlier about Dayglow. I think he's so good. I would love to be on that tour. That would be really fun.
You guys' vibe matches too.
I feel like it would match,
I should, like, honestly, if you were open for Rip Momney on that tour, I'd be like, that's a perfect vibe, like genre.
I'll just climb the ladder. Me and Rip Momney met once. I'll call him because I definitely have his number, and I'll be, hey, can you get me on a Dayglow tour? Because you opened for him once.
That's how that works, right?
Yeah, that's how the music business works.
Yeah.
I haven't done much touring as Feel Good. I did one tour, and it was the best. And I think I remember that, like, oh, I've done this a lot, and this is where I really connect, because I just feel really like I just like to talk in between songs and explain things and make jokes, and I feel like that is something you can't get unless you're on tour.
Yeah, it's some of the best parts about
Yeah.
going to see live music.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I'm just like chatting with people in front of me. Like,
It almost bums me out when I see somebody I really like who just plays their set all the way through. I'm like, just talk, like, you don't have to like do a monologue or anything, but like be involved with it.
Totally.
Yeah, but teach their own on that one.
Yeah, and I want to do both. Like, I want to be like, oh, this is the coolest show ever.
Yeah.
Like, everything matches up for 3 songs, and then we take like a 5-minute like comedy break. Like, let's just talk. Like, what's the deal with our
bring out a
beats,
stool
you know?
and just be like, we're shifting the tone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the last question is, it's interesting. A lot of the artists I'm talking to are pretty early stages of where they're at. And you're kind of in this, like, I would say like almost your second phase of like after the label and everything like that, but you have had senior success. So my question is, what's your next like milestone or goal you're going towards? Because I usually phrase it like, when do you feel like you've made it? But I feel like that's super subjective. And especially with creatives, you never really feel like you make it. You hit a milestone and then you're like, well, what's the next thing I want to go to?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, for me, I felt like, and I think you're right. Like, I could probably ask any of my artist friends, and they would also be like, I haven't made it. Have you seen how big that guy is? You know what I mean?
Talk to Ari, and he's like, what?
Yeah, he's like, what? For me, I think I want to just get more comfortable. I don't know, like a lot we were talking about, like the imposter syndrome and the, creative ruts. Like I honestly, like I feel like a milestone for me would be to like learn how to bypass those things or work with them better. Something that I don't remember often, but like I'm glad that I have friends to remind me, is that like I can look at myself and my music and where I'm at, where I've been, and I think my go-to is being like, oh well, you almost did that, and like I don't want to think that way.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I have friends that are like, dude, you're really fucking good at this thing, and you're really good at this thing and this song, and I want to be better at that. And for me, that's a milestone of being like, I can recognize without being a dick and like being a arrogant person, because I'm also just not that way, like recognize what I'm good at, and then at the same time like battling the ruts and all that. And obviously I want to be able to like live more and more comfortably off of it all.
Yeah.
But I think what I've experienced so far is like I got to a certain point while having all of that still very there, and I couldn't handle all of those things, so I would take 4 months to finish a song, which isn't like sustainable. So like I need to kind of iron those things out so that when I am at any level, I can like keep going without feeling like an imposter or, and I know it's always going to be there. It's not like I'll just be like,
well, hopefully it's like easier to manage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a milestone, because I don't mind at this point, like working somewhere. I don't mind like doing something else to sustain myself. I just have never, since I was like 17, I was like, I want to do music. And I don't know how it got to the point it did. Like I literally just jumped from one thing to another and just kept going. And this was the first time a couple years ago where I had to like go back and be like, hey, can I like live with you guys, family, for a while I like figure it out. And I think a milestone for me would be like taking that time to like just be nicer to myself throughout it all, you know, because I know I can do it. I've proven to myself I can do it. Everybody around me that I love and that I work with and that I respect and admire, they see me as them. I'm the one that sometimes doesn't, So I think for me a milestone is being like, no, just like whether you write a really good verse today or you finish a whole song or today just sucks, like you did nothing, like it's all fine. Like we're literally going to die between right now and like maybe 60 more years. Like it's all good,
Yeah.
Like why are you stressing out so much?
Yeah, I love
That's
that.
my milestone.
I love that. Yeah, it's the thing I found with that is when I first started, it was almost like 2 years ago or so, where I asked people, they would always be something like, oh, it's like, oh, get to here. Like it's like it's an analytical thing. Mm-hmm. And like the more I talk to artists, the more it's just like, I just want to be like comfortable doing my thing and not just think I suck at it.
Totally.
Yeah, and I couldn't relate more. It's like, yeah, because it's become so much more internal than it is external stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
mean, I have a lot of friends who, excuse me, beer.
I've been doing the same thing.
I have a lot of friends who have made it very far, who've had huge songs on the radio, huge shows, all of it, and none of them, at least my community of friends, none of them are like, we're all the same. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I've played shows for 2,000 people. I played shows for 10 people. I love them both equally, and neither of them mean anything to me, like, internally more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it still has the same value.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, I could play in front of a lot of people and feel like shit and feel like, oh, that was whatever, you know. But I'd rather just be in a place where I can do anything and be like, I'm enjoying this, and it's fine.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I
It's
love
just
that.
very weird.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, 'cause
Brains.
especially when you're younger. You're like, I want all this stuff,
Right.
and then when you get older, you're like, no, I just want to be happy. And
Right.
just,
Like, I just
be
want to feed my
content.
cat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but I love that. Thanks for being on. I
course.
really appreciate you coming.
thanks for having me.
And I'm sure in the intro I'll plug if you have a new song coming out or all that stuff. You can find all your stuff at Feel Good. I assume you have a website, and I mean YouTube Feel Good.
Yeah, I don't know the login to how to change my website because my label controlled it, so I need to like hit somebody up about that. But
help you out with
socials
that.
are Phil Goods Music.
Yep.
And I think by the time this comes out, I'll have a song called Unalive that is out now.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on, man.
thanks.